Hi, so I made this new rack, 168 HP, out of an old teak coffee table. It's 2 centimeters thick here, real thick stuff. And this used to be my Volca rack, because everybody knows Volcas are a gateway drug to things like modular. And Volcas, of course, slot right in between, perfectly in between two rails of a Eurorack system. Right, so I used to have the Volcas in here. One of the interesting thing about the Volcas, and maybe lesser known, is that the body of the Volca here is just a little bit bigger than the PCB would be on a modular. So hence I'm able to put the Model D here. You can put another module here if you wanted to. It's not widely known, but I feel like that was the intention of the width of, or the depth of, the width of them, yeah. Because all of the controls, but also the inputs are on the top so they could slot in. But anyway, in converting a Volca rack to a Eurorack, it means a loss of space here on the edges, because of course you have to make room for the rails. So I had to cut these veneers very thin here, despite it being 2 centimeters thick. You can see very thin, and then glued them on with epoxy to the rails. And I'll show you how I did that in a moment. But what I've done here is I've also, because I had two racks that I made, two sets of sides, created this rack for an oscilloscope, the NTS2 and the NTS1 for effects, which of course I route out here. The out is here, so I had to do something like this to make room for it. And then I have these passive modules, a low pass gate, a mixer/mutes, and an attenuator here, which match up perfectly. This is also removable, and that's why it looks like this, so that I can reach the inputs in the back. And then, of course, I have my MPC Live 2 up here, which I route basically the output there into here for basically end chain effects and side chain compression, but also a little bit of reverb. But then I also use the outputs in the back, the CV gate outputs. So there's 4 CVs, 4 gates that come out the back to clock the system, but also run various CV for modulation and also volt per octave in the system itself. It's like an extra sequencer. And often I'll just listen to it from the speakers if I'm feeling lazy, or I'll run my headphones out from the back. So it's like an output for me as well. All right, so here's a better look at the rack. Let's look at the sides. So here I have that Constant Lab power board, which provides 2 milliamp positive and 1.5 negative, I think, and then another 1.55 volt. So I routed out this section here so that the cable to provide power would be recessed and make that accessible. And of course over here I put 2 1-year modules and also routed this section out. One the USB and then one other a headphone out, just so they can be used on its own. The USB, I use a splitter to power both the NTS1 and the NTS2. That comes out of the side here. And you can see there's these screw marks. I didn't end up using these, but they're originally for the Volca, and I just filled them. They look okay. On the top here is some of these marks from the coffee table where the on the bottom where the little lattice section would have been. Kind of like it, so I kept it in. Could have masked it, but decided not to. Here's the back of the board. Here's the power, and then the power rail back here, also from Constant Lab. 6 of which are filtered, an additional 12 are not. Basically for digital noisy modules. There's also 2 connectors on the power board itself, so one here and one here. And because I have over 20, I also had to use a flying bus board just to connect 3 of them. So it's a pretty tight system, especially given the 1U modules on this side. So it adds an extra 2. But otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. You know, I used teak oil on it just to give a kind of natural finish. And then that's it. So you can see where the Volcas would have been otherwise. Slotting into here. It was originally 4.6. Of course, I had to break it out and expand it for the 84 HP rails. All right. The rest will be how I did it. Thanks. Here's a schematic I got from online from a guy named Oliver Dowie, which I used to cut out the sides of the tea coffee table. I used a skill saw for the straight lines and a jigsaw for the corners, and then clamped them together and used a belt sander to keep them even, so that on a table they'd be even. Here it is without teak oil. Just to illustrate that, you know, you can make this 6 Volca rack. I think it looks pretty good. Here I drilled out the sides in preparation for the routing for the 1U modules and also the power. It's just easier on the router. Here it is finished, ready for some teak oil, and then also screwing in the sides, the frames, which was difficult actually because you only had a few millimeters on either side, which is where the veneer needed to be glued on with epoxy. It was a kind of a fraught process to make sure it was flat. Here it is being glued on with epoxy, which actually worked really well. It's rock solid and really connected to the metal. I had to sand the metal a little bit to give it something to bite onto, but that worked well. Here's the finished product. You know, pretty tight, aligned. You can see the power in the back there, and the 1U module in the front. I had to move the power back a little bit, but there's the 1U. And yeah, it's tight. You have to put a shallow module there, but it works quite well. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments.